Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today we're going to dive into a single, highly volatile moment, a downed U.S. Apache helicopter in the Middle East. But we aren't just looking at the military incident itself. We're going to use this specific spark to decode the incredibly complex, high-stakes geopolitics of the entire Gulf region. We're taking a micro to macro approach today. We'll start with the Strait of Hormuz incident, then look at the calculus of retaliation, Iran's unyielding stance, the diplomatic tightrope, and finally, we'll zoom out to the regional permacrisis.
All right, Part 1, the Strait of Hormuz incident, the spark in the Gulf. The scene was set when President Trump announced on social media that Iran had shot down a patrolling U.S. Apache helicopter. But there is an absolutely crucial detail here. Just two. That's the number of pilots flying that Apache, and thankfully both were rescued completely uninjured. Now you might think avoiding casualties would de-escalate things, right? Maybe give everyone a reason to step back. But in the geopolitical chessboard of the Middle East, the action itself carries a weight that literally cannot be ignored.
Even with the pilots safe, President Trump made it crystal clear. He stated that the United States, quote, out of necessity, had to respond. The government simply cannot ignore a direct attack on its military assets. But exactly how they respond? Well, that's where the real high-stakes strategy kicks in.
Moving on to Part 2, the calculus of retaliation, and why the U.S. must respond.
Drawing on insights from Washington correspondent Sarah Smith, we can see a carefully engineered containment strategy driving the White House's response. It's basically a three-step playbook. Step 1, provide advanced warning. They actually telegraph the response to avoid a surprise attack that could accidentally trigger a full-blown war. Step 2, execute a targeted strike, just enough to show capability and resolve. And Step 3, prevent a tit-for-tat spiral. You limit the action, communicate clearly, and hope the violence stops at a single exchange rather than spinning totally out of control.
Which brings us to Section 3, Iran's unyielding stance and the message from Tehran. To really get this crisis, let's look at the analysis from Beirut correspondent Jeremy Bowen. It is literally a high-stakes staring contest. On one hand, you have the United States. They definitely don't want a full-scale war. But to succeed in ongoing peace talks, they have to keep the military option right there on the table. They can't look risk-averse. But on the flip side, the Iranian regime is equally determined to show that they refuse to budge. By taking down the Apache, they're demonstrating that they still have the absolute capacity to inflict pain. Neither side feels they can afford to blink here. Okay, Part 4, the diplomatic tightrope. High stakes, sluggish progress. Because both sides are so dug in, U.S. generals and President Trump are walking an incredibly fine line. Any military response has to be meticulously calibrated, like surgical, so it doesn't just destroy the sluggish yet vital diplomatic progress that's been made. We are talking about some heavy goals on the table. Reopening the Strait of Hormuz, which is a major global artery, agreeing on further talks regarding nuclear issues, and, of course, navigating the deep unpopularity of a new war within America itself. Add all that up, and an all-out war is highly undesirable, forcing a massive balancing act.
And finally, Section 5, a regional permacrisis. Let's look at the macro view. This single isolated helicopter incident, it absolutely doesn't exist in a vacuum. Jeremy Bowen uses a perfect phrase to describe what happens if an off-ramp isn't found here, an attritional permacrisis. So what is that? Well, it isn't a world war, but it certainly isn't peace either. It's a long period, potentially lasting years, of constant grinding friction, punctuated by sudden, violent lurches into warfare. Honestly, unless both sides step away, this tense standoff might just be our glimpse into the future of the Middle East. It's much easier to start a war than to end one. It's an old saying, but it's a harsh reality check regarding the illusion of a clean, decisive victory. And actually, it's a lesson currently being stress-tested in real time by leaders navigating the region, including President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And if you want proof of just how interconnected and fragile this permacrisis really is, look at the simultaneous ripple effects. Over on a completely different border, the IDF just instructed residents in northern Israel to get into their shelters amid missile launches coming from Lebanon. In an environment this deeply tense, one action basically guarantees another, and an Israeli response is always presumed. The friction is everywhere, and it is constant. Which leaves us with one vital question to think about. How easily could an isolated spark in the Strait of Hormuz ignite a broader, completely uncontrollable regional conflict? We've seen today how a single down helicopter forces military action, how it stresses fragile diplomacy, and how it feeds directly into a regional permacrisis. The pieces on the board are constantly moving, and the margins for error are incredibly slim. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning those wider impacts, and I'll catch you next time.